more recently, in the last 10 years or so, I've really found another area of law that's very near and dear to my heart, and involves suing abusive debt collectors on behalf of consumers. And I'm here to get the word out that you don't have to be treated with disrespect, with lies, with indignities, or unfairly by collection agencies. And I'm not saying that all collection agencies would treat consumers in such a way, but there are a few of them out there that somehow feel by turning up the volume on consumers and insulting them or threatening them or embarrassing them and humiliating them will get them money faster. So those are all illegal practices that are punishable, and they're regulated by what's called the Fair Debt Collection Practice. And the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act is a federal consumer protection law that was enacted back in 1977 by Congress after they did a lot of study, took a lot of testimony, did a lot of investigation, and they found quote unquote abundant evidence of deceptive, abusive, harassing collection activity that was increasing marital instability, loss of employment, and personal invasions of privacy. And that's pretty much right out of the statute. And this law starts with that preamble. And Congress determined that there were other ways that debt collectors could collect their debts without, doing any of those things. So they enacted this law. It's a consumer protection law, and it's there to protect you, me, or anyone else who owes a debt from these types of practices. Now, you can always go out and file bankruptcy. That's pretty much a no-brainer. Still, 99% of the people out there qualify for bankruptcy, and they're not going to lose any property. It's only those people that typically have the Lamborghini sitting out in the pole barn or a yacht someplace, or that are trying to hide something. They're not being truthful when they file these federal court papers, which would include a petition for bankruptcy and all the schedules listing out your property. But before you even get to that point, what's happening is, in the midst of the worst financial crisis that this country has seen since the Great Depression, where 15% of the U.S. population have lost their employment, where unemployment still remains at a staggering 9.6%, there is one industry that has not only survived, but it's thrived in this recession, and that is the debt collection industry. What's happening is it's a $100 billion problem. We have banks that have basically lent $1 trillion to the consumer. We've got $1 trillion worth of outstanding consumer loans out there. And a lot of that, the majority of it, ends up getting charged off. And when a bank charges a debt off, that doesn't mean that you no longer owe the debt. That's just an accounting trick that the creditor can use to get a good tax write-off from the Internal Revenue Service and continue along their merry way. The credit card industry is the most profitable arm of the banking industry. And when they charge off a debt because it hasn't been paid on in more than 180 days, it will typically go to a collection agency. And if that collection agency is not able to get a payment or a promise to pay within 30 days, 30 to 60 days, the creditor will take the account back and send it off to a secondary credit or collection agency, and so on. Sometimes it'll go to a third collection agency. If the debt is still not collected at that point, it usually gets sold on a secondary market. And there's some huge debt buying associations out there that buy this debt up by the billions of dollars. And they buy this debt at 2 cents, 5 cents on the dollar, and then they go out and try to collect the full face value of that debt. And typically, it's not going to be long before somebody is going to receive a summons and a complaint, and they're going to have to show up in court. Well, the whole debt buyer model is that most people, 95% of people, are just going to stick their head in the hole in the sand like an ostrich and ignore what's happening. And that's what they want, because now they've got the default judgment. And once they get the default judgment, it's pretty easy to go from there to garnishing wages, garnishing bank accounts, and garnishing tax refunds. Even those people that are on Social Security disability, if they get a tax refund, that's what these debt buyers are going to garnish. And although a creditor or a debt collector can never garnish Social Security income, it comes from the government to your bank, either by, most of the time these days they're doing it electronically depositing that money into your bank account. They can't touch that money, but they can, the creditors who have a judgment, a legal judgment signed by the judge, they can go after those tax refunds, because that's not considered Social Security disability income.
Both tax, federal and state?
They won't go after your federal tax. They can only go after the state.
Okay.
Yeah. And if anybody has any questions, including the debt collectors in the audience, feel free to speak up. You need this just as much as the consumers, so I'm here to just try and shed a little of the knowledge that I've acquired on what's going on out there. It's grim. It's really grim. But there is kind of this silver lining to the cloud, and that's with this consumer law, which allows the consumers to fight back. And the problem is most consumers don't know about this law. They don't know they have any rights under, they think if they owe the debt, oh my God, I must be guilty, Well, owing a debt is not a crime, okay? It's not against the law to owe a debt. And there are collectors out there. I've represented people that, have called me up and said, the sheriff is on his way, I'm going to prison, And, they're totally freaking out. That's just a tactic that a debt collector uses to get you to pay him quickly over the phone, okay? Because very rarely do they want you to know what their physical address is. They don't want to wait around and get a paper check and might bounce, and it's just much more efficient for their model to take the payment over the phone. And that's about the worst thing you can do, is give a debt collector your bank account information so they can do an electronic deposit. And, what you have to understand is these debt collectors, the ones that are calling you, and I don't blame the individual collectors so much as I do their bosses and the training that they get, because it's tough to be a debt collector. It's got to be, unless you're a sociopath. they typically are very strong personality. They can manipulate the situation. They can make you feel guilty. They can, they're trained. And then on the other hand, there's some that use the good guy approach, and they're a problem solver. And those are some of the good ones. So, but we're not worried about the good ones. If the good ones are just doing their job, they're just obeying the law. It's the bad ones that we're concerned about. And the reason the government set this law up was to protect the consumer, and the government knew that they did not have the resources with which to govern or regulate the debt collection agency. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they try, but they're just they don't do a very good job, and they're just a small little dent in all the collection that's going on out there. So how the government structured this was they put a provision in the law that allows the consumer to get an attorney, consumer attorney, to represent them. And as long as the consumer prevails in the federal lawsuit, the debt collector has to pay the attorney fees. So I've never charged a consumer any out-of-pocket money. I know if there's a violation by what they tell me. And I think I'm getting to be a fairly good judge of character, although I sometimes still get proven wrong on it. But for the most part, I think people are honest. And all this propaganda out there that the Chamber of Commerce likes to put out. Who's the Chamber of Commerce? They're the guys that the banks pay. They're the propaganda that the banks put out there. And so there's this guilt trip, this, it's Chamber of Commerce propaganda that makes people feel guilty about owing a debt and not being able to pay it. Makes people feel guilty about filing for bankruptcy when it's impossible otherwise for them to pay their debt. But what does the bank expect? That people are going to continue to pay the minimum payment for the rest of their life at the expense of not putting anything aside for the retirement, or paying their bills. It's bankruptcy's there to help honest debtors get a fresh start, and the percentage of people that try to cheat the system is so minuscule that I just think it's crazy that they put this information out there. Yes, sir.
Can I take Social Security from an employer that gets Social Security to recover lost wages?
Are you an employer?
I am lost wages.
Sorry?
I am the employee with lost wages.
With lost wages. All right, I want to make sure I understand your question. Can you repeat it?
I have lost wages. Now, if all she has is income is her Social Security.
Who's she?
Or the employer.
Okay.
Because they're out of business.
Right.
Can I recoup any lost wages from her Social Security?
No.
I would have to sue for whatever they have.
Exactly. And you wouldn't be able to get at the Social Security income, but they probably have other assets. And if you reduce it to a judgment, there's what we know as court officers that go out and they enforce the judgment by, I've seen them show up on people's front doorstep. And you know what? You don't have to let them in. And I wouldn't if I were you. I'd just go hide in the bathroom until he went away. But I mean, as soon as you crack the door open, you can be guaranteed they're going to stick their foot in the door, and in they come. And a lot of them are sheriffs.
You're talking IRS or?
No, just talking local municipalities. They're typically police officers that are trying to pick up some extra money by being court officers or working for private debt collectors to go out there and enforce a judgment. And as soon as one of these guys shows up at your front door, you're going to start calling. You're going to call anybody you know to get some money because you want these people out of your life, out of your living room as quickly as possible. I knew one guy, a local guy here in Genesee County, and we sued him about 15 times probably. It was just, he was just a renegade, out of control. And what gets me is, the judges, it's almost like they turn a blind eye to it. They're just not interested in what goes on until you sue them, and then all of a sudden you get their attention. So, ma'am,
Did you sue the sheriff?
we did sue the court officer, and we had to sue him under a different law. It's called the 1986 Civil Rights Law. I was co-counsel on that case, or those cases, and we couldn't get at him under the FDCPA, which personally I think is a much more straightforward case. The Fair Debt Collection Practice Act is strict liability. You're either compliant with the law or you're violating. There's no gray in between. So if you're disrespectful to a consumer, if you tell a consumer a lie, if you threaten to sue them, I'm going to serve a lawsuit on you next week, and you don't follow through with it, the collector doesn't follow through with it, it's a lie. It was a threat. It was meant to deceive the consumer and scare them into pain, and it's violation of the law.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Say that a debt collector calls a house that's not even on when you filled out for the credit card or for the loan or whatever not, and keep completely calling that number that's not even located, trying to find a family member, and keep calling your house for it. That's against the law.
Yes, it is against
And if they keep calling, you know that you can sue them, and many times they keep calling, that's more money you keep getting.
Right.
Yeah, I know about that law, but I just was like,
Right.
yeah.
Well, that's what happens is
Yeah.
with these
Is that
collectors,
okay?
what they do is it's called skip tracing,
Okay.
and the skip tracing is a debt collector's way of getting into information about the consumer, who they know, who they can call. They literally will Google map the consumer, and they'll ask for reports, and they'll find out what the neighbors' names are, and they'll call the neighbors. I love those cases, where my client comes in and says, yeah, my neighbor, Mrs. Jones, brought me over this note and said, here, call Fred Hanna and Associates right away. It's important, And, that's strictly illegal, because what it's doing is basically disclosing to a third party that a consumer owes a debt. And that is strictly prohibited. You can't do it. But
So if I have a debt and I no longer live with my mother and they call her, that's wrong?
it is wrong, and it's a violation, and your mother is protected by this law.
Okay.
It's harassment. That's harassment, okay?
I don't know how many
Got no-
times she's told me that, hey, this person called. I'm
Right.
like,
One thing you need to do, and it's always good for your case, is for you to communicate with the debt collector. Because how else, they need to know, that you can't pay the debt. So tell them. They'll ask you 100 different questions, well, can you borrow it from your mother? Can you borrow it from your sister? Can you borrow it from your retirement? I'm sorry, I can't afford to pay. It's a
If you
simple
say the
thing.
word to them, don't call my house anymore, isn't that, and I heard that or saw that somewhere.
You have to
that
put
you
it in
stop.
writing.
Have to put it in writing.
You have to put it in writing. And if you're gonna put anything in writing for any kind of legal effect, for gosh sake, keep a copy, you know? In fact, keep a copy of the envelope that's been properly addressed, has a stamp on it, has the correct address. Make a copy of that along with the letter. Best thing you could do is, you know, send it certified, but, you know, the mailbox rule, if you keep a copy of the letter, put a date on it, sign it, make sure you identify the account number. The other thing that's just been reaffirmed by the United States Supreme Court is that it's still illegal for telemarketers and debt collectors to call you on your cell phone unless you've given them express permission, which is usually in writing, and also if you provided the original creditor with your cell phone number, that would be deemed you've given the creditor's agent, the collection agent, the right to call you on that cell phone. But you can revoke that right. All you have to do is revoke your consent by writing a letter, keeping a copy of it, and sending it to the debt collector and say, I hereby, and the creditor, send the letter to both the creditor and the debt collector and say, I hereby revoke consent for you to call me on my cell phone.
Now, what if it's somebody else's creditor that used to have the number and they keep calling and you keep telling them, I don't know no so-and-so, I don't know no so-and-so, please stop calling my cell phone, I just got this number. And they steady do it just like a house phone, the same thing. And they're asking for Joe, whoever Joe is. I don't know Joe, quit calling me. You running my minutes down.
Well, you know, you have to find out. We all have to do a little bit of investigation.
Okay.
Is there a number popping up on the caller ID?
Yes, it is.
So you take and you Google that number.
Okay.
And did you pull up 1-800-NOTES or Who Called Us website?
Yeah, but what happens is it don't give you who it is. It tells you just the address, the area that is in. When I pull it up, I don't know if I'm pulling it up.
Right, I know what you're talking about. But what sometimes will happen is by Googling that number, you're gonna pull up a couple of sites where consumers all write in and say, yeah, I keep getting calls from this number.
Okay.
It's CBE Collection Company, and boy, are they rude. And, you know, but, you know, other times they'll write in and say, this is a total scam. Which you have to understand is there are on the fringe collectors that want to stay off in the shadows, and they don't want anyone to know where they are, where they're operating out of. I swear some of them are calling from East Africa and India and I know Israel. There's been some from Israel. So those guys, there's not a whole lot you can do, and they're usually the most outrageous. They're the ones that are saying, well, we're coming over to get you right now. So, you know, it's tough. When you get a call like that, you know, you don't know what to believe. But when I hear it come from people calling me, I'm like, well, I wish this was coming from a debt collector, because that would be one heck of a case. That's a case where, you know, if your heart starts to palpitate and you can't sleep at night, and you're emotionally distressed and you're anxious, you know, those cases can have actual damages. And I wanted to get into that because this is, let's see if I can get this to work. Okay. So we've covered a lot of this, but the actual damages is that if a debt collector does get caught, then he's going to have to pay what's called statutory damages up to $1,000, and that's basically just a punishment to the debt collector. They have to pay the consumer up to $1,000 if they got caught. You can also get actual damages in those rarer cases, maybe 10% of the cases where people are really suffering. And I've had people come in crying When I see tears coming out of people's eyes, I know they're not lying to me. I mean, I just know that they have really been hurt by the conduct. All about money. All about money. I had a little 91-year-old lady. The bank called 48 times in 2 weeks. You know, she's on disability, doesn't have the money to pay. What do you hope to accomplish? You just, and on the very first call, when we got the collector notes, on the very first call, you know, the collector wrote in there, you know, she started to cry, and, well, you know, that's a pretty good case, you know. We got rid of a $10,000 debt, and I netted about 60, 70 grand on that case. So, I mean, there are those types of cases. But in any event, the consumer doesn't pay, and typically the hammer, the big hammer to the debt collector is not paying $1,000 to the consumer, is paying the lawyer fees. And if they're smart, they settle the case right away. But if they want to jack the lawyer around and increases his time that he has to put in to prove the case, then a lot of times, I mean, those attorney fees are just, I mean, they're outrageous. And the judges will award them if the facts warrant it. Yes, ma'am?
I have a question for you. I know that this act does not apply to businesses,
That's correct.
but I have an interest in an LLC that closed, and I was shown as the manager. No,
Right.
they started calling me and calling my neighbors,
Right.
but I didn't owe the debt. It was a business debt for LLC. They harassed me at home. They called my neighbors and said things like, "What kind of car does she drive?" And you're saying that if that's the case, there's nothing you can do.
Well, not under the FDCPA, and that makes that case.
What about it's just common law?
There may be something out
Slander.
there, right? Exactly.
They
But now
somehow got into
you
my
have
bank account too.
the problem with
They
the
got a
problem with
name out of
common
my
law.
bank account that they could only have found in the bank account. And they switched numbers, you know, and I see a phone call from my health club. And it's them.
Right.
They switched numbers, the only way they could find out about the health club is to
Right.
get into my bank.
Oh, I know.
Personal.
I know. They can actually put up false caller ID. They have the ability to do it. The debt collection industry, they have a lot of money and they invest a lot of money in technology. So the other thing that they're doing is rather than manually dialing calls, I think that's almost unheard of nowadays. A computer dials the calls. And I mean, they blast out the calls. I mean, by tens of millions of calls for one company per month. And I mean, that's just one company.
But it
So,
says stay on the line.
right.
And if you so and so, because I get this every day from somebody else's bills. They call my cell phone
Well,
house.
you know
and
what?
I'm like, if y'all keep calling, I keep telling y'all take me off this list and don't do it no more. They really think this guy lives. And
Right.
this is his number.
We have a case against a collection company out in, I'm gonna leave some cards up here on this table, but we have a case against a collection company for calling somebody that doesn't owe the debt. We call that a stranger to the debt. And, you know, they robo-dialed her. They called her 45 times using an automated dialing system. And if they use an automated dialing system and or they leave artificial voice messages on your cell phone, those are violations of the TCPA, which is the telephone. Come on in, sir. Welcome. The Telephone Consumer Protection Act protects consumers against unwanted calls, and those are $500 per call. So I mean, if you get, yeah, did you hear that? I'm gonna repeat that again, okay? If you violate the TCPA by calling somebody that you don't have a prior established business relationship with, that debt collector's calling a stranger to the debt like you, or maybe even just a debtor that didn't have that cell phone number at the time she took the loan out with the bank. And if they skip trace and they find that cell phone number and they start calling it with an automated dialing system, a robo-dialer, those are $500 to $1,500 a call. If you can prove they intentionally were making the call even though they knew that they didn't have an established business relationship with the recipient of the call, you know, I mean, so there's that $500 to $1,500 range. Those are exciting cases. I like those cases.
Keep in mind.
Right. And you know, you can Google this stuff. Go out and educate yourself on your rights as consumers. There's a lot of information out there, and you know, the debt collectors can't keep you from getting that information anymore.
How about getting their address?
Well, if it's a brick and mortar debt collection call center, they're gonna have an address, and you're gonna be able to get that address.
Well, what about what we found was we had somebody, one of these French people call. So we told them not to call, and they said, and wouldn't give an address. So when they would call, we'd say, can you hold a minute? And just put it on the desk and let them sit there after a while.
Right. Well, I always say, don't get mad, get
Exactly.
hit them where it hurts, and that's usually the pocket.
If you get upset with them, though, that encourages them to call again.
So as you can see here, just kind of overviewing this law, these violations are very costly to the debt collectors when they do get caught. So it's you know, they're skirting a fine line, and you know, they don't want to get caught, but when they do get caught, it costs them a lot of money unless they quickly settle the case. So let's just talk about a few of the definitions here. A consumer is someone who owes a debt for personal, family, or household purposes. A debt collector is not just everybody that calls you for money. A lot of times it's the creditor calling, the original creditor, the bank that you actually, you know, borrowed the money from. They're not governed by the FDCPA. There are some Michigan statutes that, you know, they're not too great because they don't provide for much in the way of statutory damages. The big incentive would be $50 if you prove that the creditor harassed you, plus your attorney fees. Plus, in any event, you can always get actual damages. But actual damages are hard to prove. And the statutory damages, it's strict liability. You prove that they called you at 10 minutes to 8 o'clock in the morning, boom, they're not compliant, and they gotta pay you up to $1,000. And it's usually $1,000. So the debt collector is a third-party collector that is in the business of collecting debts of another entity. They're the ones that your bank will refer it out to and or sell it to. Debt buyers are also debt collectors. So they're not allowed to call you between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. They're not allowed to call you at work. They're not allowed to disclose and communicate to your family, friends, and relatives and neighbors. And like I said, neighbors have a cause of action here too, if they want to get involved. That would be you, ma'am.
I have a question real quick. Employer, say that you apply for a position with the company and they do a credit check on you. It happens so that debt collector turns you in to, as in already been preferred by a debt collector going to court, and they put it on your record as in garnishment or of owing a debt that have never been paid. Now, would that be legal actions can be taken against?
Well, I think what you're talking about is when a collection agency or a creditor reports the debt being owed to the credit reporting agency.
Yeah, basically.
If you owe the debt, that's legal.
Okay.
They can report you.
Okay.
But what happens a lot of times is that the debt may get paid. And then, say you pay the debt collector takes the money, but during this process, he's decided to sell it to another debt buyer. So he gets the money, the next thing you know, you've got another debt collector knocking on your door or ringing your phone and trying to collect that money from you. And a very effective way to get paid is to report it on your credit report. Because it does. It hurts you in many, many ways.
Or say that it's already been paid and it's still on your it's on your report
Right.
of employment. How can that be wiped off away from there? It shouldn't be on there if it's already been paid.
Well, it is
After
on
maybe
there.
about 7 to 10 years.
No, it is, right. After 7 to 10 years, they have to remove it.
It's not removed.
Okay.
It's mine. It's
Right.
a
Well, then
it's a
you-
stupid hospital bill. That's a
Right.
stupid. They were stupid because I have to start paying them. Then all of a sudden they start garnishing my check. I was like, how can you garnish my check and I'm paying you all?
Right.
So basically, I mean, it's not no big deal because I'm employed. I have a very good job, but I just
Well, you can write the credit reporting agency
Right.
and dispute that debt. And if you show proof that you paid the debt, canceled check, or a satisfaction of judgment, that's prima facie evidence that you no longer owe the debt. And what the credit reporting agency will do is contact the debt collector or the creditor and say, here, this debt is being disputed. What do you say about that? And the creditor or the debt collector will go through their records, hopefully, and they'll do an investigation to ensure that the debt has been paid. And then they'll either do the right thing and they'll report back to the credit reporting agency, yes, that's correct, remove it, or they'll do the wrong thing. They won't take the time to investigate. They'll hit one of those little keys on the computer and it'll be re-verify the debt. So the debt stays on the credit report. And that's where you can get them, because that's a violation of the Fair Credit Reporting Act.
it's embarrassing when you get a job and that thing is still just lingering here.
Well, and they know it's embarrassing, that's why they put it on there, because they want to get paid more money.
But I still get the job, so it don't even matter.
I have another question about the court officer. I know somebody who's, a court officer showed up at their house on a judgment. They wouldn't let them in, and they said they could take the door off and come in
Oh,
and
they
take whatever they
cannot.
want.
No.
If they tried something like that, it was civil.
No. You let them take the front door off. You have another Ruby Ridge, right?
Oh, you,
Sure. So, all right. Sir, you had a question.
I had a situation with a debt for a hospital bill. And the error with the bill is that the billing code was incorrect. And I paid my copay. This bill was over $2,000. The copay was $104. Third party picked it up, lawyer out of Ohio picked it up. Wanted to garnish my wages for this bill. And I kept telling her I didn't owe the bill. It was a referral deal through the doctor, so I didn't owe it. It was a lawyer, it was a law firm, so I had to write the credit bill, like you say, to dispute it. Okay, when it got that far, they still didn't want to do the legal action to dispute that. Still saying I owe the bill, they was gonna guarantee my wages. I asked the lady when she called the company, the insurance company, to get the information. She said, I can't call them. You have to call them. And then I had to call the insurance company, tell them to call the lawyer to let them know that there was an error in the billing. And I knew I didn't owe this bill. For 2 years, they were trying to get this money. So finally they got down to it, like you said, sometimes they ignore it and they don't do it, like you said, re-verify, whatever. And that's what happened to me, and it was still on my report. And it shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Right. And that takes a lot of time.
A lot of time.
A lot of your time.
A lot of time.
Your free time.
They kept calling.
Yeah.
you know, like you said, and then I didn't know, after 8 o'clock at night,
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock? Okay.
It's illegal to call after 9 o'clock to collect a debt, or before 8 a.m. in the morning.
So I finally got it, and then the judge, she finally, whatever she did, had to discharge off of it and send me the thing in the mail, the copy, and then send it back to the 68th District Court. Let the judge know
Oh.
that it's been disputed, it's been taken care of.
I see. So they got a judgment against you.
Yeah,
So you don't ever want to let them get a judgment against you. Go in there and fight it.
right.
I mean, if all you say is, you know, I'm not sure I owe this debt, but even if I do, there's no way in Sam's heck that it's that much.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Now you've just put the burden of proof back on the creditor to, you know, provide competent, admissible evidence, you know, that they are entitled to what they're asking for. And a lot of times these debt buyers, they can't prove they even own the debt. They're paying 2 cents on the dollar. You know, do you think they're going to get a lot of good, you know, paperwork with it and information? They don't get good paperwork for 2 cents on the dollar. So, you know, you have to protect yourself. And I'll tell you, I would much rather take 3 to 5 minutes and explain something to somebody before they let the default judgment be entered against them than
Right.
to have to try and go back and undo it.
Well, I had a problem with them every year trying to get my
Tax
taxes
refund.
earned.
Right.
And I didn't know how to stop that until later on. I just learned how to stop that with the garnishment of release, stating certain things and that if you get certain things, your hour, your wages, your income and all that change. Well, I just recently been discharged from bankruptcy as of the
Right.
5th of this month, so I'm done.
Congratulations.
I filed all that.
You've got a fresh start.
I got a
now.
fresh start.
That's right. Now pay your bills on time, and
I
your
don't
credit
know no
score will
bills.
go way back up there.
Right.
That's the most important thing you can do to get your credit score back up. Is just pay your bills on time. Once you get all that debt discharged, you know, the banks look at you and say, "Hey, he can't do this for another 8 years, and
Right.
he doesn't owe anybody anything." He's
Right.
probably a good credit
But they were
risk.
still trying to take my return. And the lady at the courthouse said they didn't get the notice, certificate, a notice. And when the bankruptcy court printed the paper,
Right.
and she showed me, she said, yeah, they got it.
Right.
She said, they got it. And I
Right.
said, well,
They just ignored it.
they just ignored
They
it.
just ignored it.
Well,
They
I'm trying to
didn't
show her the
think- they
paperwork,
didn't
but she
think
didn't want to see it.
Well,
That's
they
how
didn't
we
think
use
you
it.
would do anything, and they didn't think your bankruptcy lawyer would do anything.
Well, I called Detroit.
Right. Well,
And she told me what to do.
Right.
And I
That's
called the state of Michigan and she told me what to do. Fax her this 9BA paper, that cover letter from the 341 meeting, showing that you filed.
Right.
And I did that.
we do that. We do that for all our clients that we file bankruptcy on, because that's another thing. It's like this gentleman said. You know, you get a discharge and your debt is discharged, and yet, you know, some debt buyer picks up that debt and they go to report it. Maybe they didn't scrub it for bankruptcy. That's checking the records to see if the debt was discharged. And if they start reporting it, we've got a system set up in my office where we send one shot over the bow, one certified letter. This debt was discharged in bankruptcy. You better stop collection attempts on it right now. And that includes reporting it on this person's credit reports, because that is a collection attempt.
How long does it usually take for that to be discharged? As in, like, going to a bankruptcy lawyer, signing all the papers, and getting it out of the way? How
6
long will it
months.
take?
Less than
Yeah.
6 months.
Took me 4
Before you,
months.
yeah, 4 to 6 months. Yes, ma'am.
If you do bankruptcy, you said discharge, so like if you do a credit report after you file bankruptcy, is it gonna say, like for everything that you filed, is it gonna say discharge, or that stuff is just gonna be wiped off
No.
there, or?
All those bills are still gonna stay on your credit report, but now, you know, they're gonna show discharge and bankruptcy, 0 balance.
When
And
is
it
that-
will fall off eventually, after, you know, 7 to 10 years.
And that starts right after you get your judgment.
Right after you get your discharge.
Long
I
road.
thought I saw somebody at the door. So.
Oh, did you?
My second question is how far year-wise can
Oh,
someone
yeah,
back
I will too.
to collect?
Statute of limitations, great question. This lady said, this is this is a really good question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
She says, how far can a collector or a creditor go back and sue you for an old debt? And in Michigan, the statute of limitations is 6 years from the date of your last payment.
Yeah.
So I get cases all the time where,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
these debt collectors, I mean, right before the 6-year
Yeah.
statute runs, they're like harassing these people to get a payment, and these people don't know any better, and they'll pay $25 on a $10,000 debt, and boom, the statute of limitations starts over. So now it's an additional 6 years.
Okay, so that, I
Right.
did that too.
So if you haven't paid your debt in 5.5 years, for God's sake, don't make a payment, you know, in the last, between 5.5 and 6 months.
But it's done.
We got a question. So bad.
I'll try to put it back.
So I had a debt that was a credit card for Discover from, it was opened like 17 or 18 years ago. And just recently, okay, it was like $1,000 limit on that card. I received my check from work and I got a garnishment. They had taken 25% of my pay.
Mm.
So the $1,000 on my credit card was just under $5,000 now. And so they're just taking it out of my check.
Well, they had to have sued you.
Wow.
Okay, a creditor cannot just take money out of your check. They have to serve you with a summons and complaint, and you have 21 days to answer. And this is what we were talking about before, because some people just, they look at the complaint and they say, I don't want to deal with it, and into the circular filing system it goes. Or what can also happen, and what frequently does happen, is the creditor or the debt collector, they do what's called sewer service. They take the complaint that they're supposed to serve the defendant with, and they flush it down the toilet. That's why we call it sewer service. So maybe that happened to you. If you never got legal paperwork in the mail, somebody didn't walk up to you and say, here, this is for you. This is a present from Capital One. We'll see you in court.
Right, but I didn't get a paper, and it wasn't served or anything.
Right.
But it was from almost 18 years ago, and I had not made any payment.
Well, then we need to take a look at that, like right away. I cannot believe how busy I am. In the last 2 weeks, I got a call from a 19-year-old girl who had a joint account with her father, who the father wasn't paying his bills, and so they got a judgment against the father. Well, this girl's mother left her $13,000 in life insurance. She just passed away a couple years ago. And the father was on the account for convenience. It wasn't his money, but it was a joint bank account. And Asset Acceptance went in there and swooped the whole account.
Wow.
Took all $13,000 of this girl's money. She had to drop out of college. I mean, the poor dear, it's just amazing what she's been through with that. I mean, her whole life has gone off course because a debt collector took her money, and they never gave her notice, and they didn't do what they should have done. There's a presumption. If it's a joint bank account, the presumption is that 50-50 ownership. So a creditor should only be able to take 50%. And they took full 100%. We're going after them with a vengeance. So if it's an 18-year-old debt that you haven't paid on, you're going to be in trouble. Just come see me and we'll sort it out.
I was just surprised that it was down to $1,000 to a judgment.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, when you're charging 30% interest rate plus 19 different fees, over the limit fees, and this fee and that fee and the late fee, and I mean, it adds up so fast. I mean, the bulk of the debt, many times, it's more than 50% of phantom fees. I call them phantom fees because it's BS. They'd never get those fees but for their pit bull debt collectors that go out and they get that money. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we had a question about, filing bankruptcy on house and taxes. How taxes,
State taxes,
like property.
real estate property.
Yeah,
The real estate property taxes go with the house. So you're not personally obligated on real estate property taxes. Now, I've heard otherwise for businesses on personal property, well, that's non-dischargeable. It's like withholding taxes. If you're an employer, those are not gonna be dischargeable in bankruptcy. But some income taxes are. You know, if they're more than 3 years old and you filed your return and you just didn't have the money to go with it, if that return was older than 3 years and, you know, there's a few other rules that go along with it, like you can't be a tax protester. And you can't be evading, you can't be a tax evader either. But I mean, so there is hope to get some of those older income taxes off. And pretty much, I think the general rule is that penalties are always dischargeable. So that'll help a lot of people out.
Good.
You file bankruptcy, and to what extent is your own personal home exempt?
Good question. This lady asked if she files bankruptcy, to what extent would her personal residence be in jeopardy? And really, in bankruptcy, what we do is we add up the value of all your assets. We figure out what all your liabilities are, you know, what the total amount of debt is that you owe. And then we do an income expense analysis. So we find out what's left over at the end of the month, which usually isn't a whole lot. The next thing we look at is what are the value of your assets? Well, you know, the paid for Ferrari and the pole barn, you're not gonna get to keep it. You know, I'm sorry. You know, but you know, if your house if the equity in your home is less than $21,000 and you're a single person, you don't have anything to worry about because you're allowed to keep up to $21,000 equity in a personal residence, or you could have a bought and paid for $21,000 house, or if you're married, that figure doubles, so now you're up to $42,000, or if you're married and your spouse doesn't owe the debt, you've got what's called Michigan tenancies by the entirety, which you could have a $10 million house and you could owe $10 million. But if your wife doesn't owe that creditor, then you get to file bankruptcy and exempt that $10 million house completely.
What if your spouse doesn't file?
The spouse does not have to file. Does not have, I know.
Is the house still
I
exempt?
don't know too many people with $10 million houses either.
you only see them on TV.
Right.
But is the house exempt because it's a joint?
You
And one
know,
doesn't
you
file.
can file, one spouse can file bankruptcy, no problem, and not affect the other spouse's, credit score at all.
Really?
But,
The house, if you have more than $42,000 equity, well, if the spouse didn't file.
then you file the Michigan tenancies by the entirety and you exempt the whole thing. Right. That's a nice law. It protects the spouse that saves and from the spouse that spends. I think that's a pretty good law. So, here's a letter. If you want the collection agency to stop calling, just write them a letter. Dear debt collector, DC, do not call me. I'm not dealing with you anymore. I'm not paying this debt, you know, and sign your name. And you know, you want to put the account number, you want to date it, and keep a copy of it.
I have a question.
I was divorced about 10 years ago, and I'm still getting a bill that my husband hung up, and ex-husband hung up, and I told him I'm not paying this.
Right,
He
you're
owes
not
me.
liable,
I'm not paying it.
cause
But
was
the
it,
phone it was a cell phone in my name.
ooh, well, then you're liable. If it was in your name and you're the one who signed your name on the application, if you sign your name on the application, then you're liable. But if it's, if you're only an authorized user, spend away.
But this was 10 years ago.
That's why I never get married. Okay, here's something else. The debt collector needs to identify themselves when they call you. Okay, they can't be pretending to be, someone else. So someone said something about a fake caller ID that was put up, or if they leave you a message, those are good. Hold on to those voice messages. Because if they don't tell you when they're leaving a voice message on your answering machine who they are and that they're a debt collector, boom, it's $1,000 in your pocket, plus my attorney fees. The other problem we have is where these collectors are calling and leaving messages on third parties. I have a case going right now, where the sister, she, my client, the consumer, put her name down as a personal reference.
Yeah.
Now, I always thought references, you called the references before you lent the money, but evidently not in the debt collector's world. You call the references when they don't pay the money. And that's what happened in this case. And the debt collector called the sister and said, this is Margaret Green calling, please call me back at such and such a number. Well, the sister's like, wow. And I think she said it's about your brother Sam, maybe. But regardless, she calls the number back and, hello, J.J. Marshall and Associates, and, she hears the collection activity going on in the background, the swearing, the cussing, the yelling, the show me the money. You're gonna show me the money now, So she knows it's a collection agency, and now she knows that her brother is being collected upon, and that's a violation. I don't do these letter cases. They're supposed to send certain language in the letter. I'd much prefer to handle a abusive, harassing telephone call, because I think that hurts people more than a letter, a piece of paper. That you can kind of control. You can throw it in the trash. You can't control your phone from ringing, and you shouldn't have to turn your phone off just because some debt collectors got your phone number and put it into their robo-dialer, so you're getting 10 calls a day. Well, threats of violence, that goes without saying. Abusive conversations, disrespecting you, saying stuff like you never intended to pay this debt. You're trying to rip us off, those are all violations. I gotta play something for you.
What's wrong with you, man? You like bad checks and throwing tools? Are you just a piece of small life you can sit or what? Yeah. You want liquor? You remember that bad liquor you wrote? You don't remember that, huh? Okay, well, forgive me for that liquor. You run off the check you wrote, that's crazy. It is my business. You're a piece of shit. You never put in the bill. You're trying to steal my fucking tools. What do you mean it's not my business? Really? I'm the owner. And I want my shit or my money. One of the two. You gone? What a check. I'm calling the name while I get my tools to.
I'm glad to report.
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you this question. Did you go at the liquor store? Yes, you didn't do it. And you didn't sit in my
Yeah, so it happens, and I don't know, it's just money. I mean, come on, why can't everyone just get along?
Can you record that on your, is there a way to record it on your phone when it comes in?
If you've got a smartphone, you can record it.
2020 continues its hour.
Or you can just get a little tape recorder,
Here's Brian.
put the phone on speaker.
This phone call was made by a debt collector to a laid-off executive with fallen behind on his car payment. The foul language, the threatening tactics, and the timing of the call in the middle of the night are all entirely illegal under federal law, but quite common, according to at least one former debt collector.
Mean works better than nice. Mean works better than nice. And in terms of being a debt collector, it does.
Until he quit the industry in disgust with himself, Mike Flanagan was that kind of debt collector, making big money on the phone as Mr. Mean.
I was all over the scheme, but I trained others on how to do things. When I first became a sales director, I had absolutely no idea how ruthless a man had to be. For God's sake, tell the U.S. name.
Flanagan agreed to provide 2020 with a rare inside look at the secrets of his success as one of America's 146,000 debt collectors.
You get a woman to cry, drop a fact. That's that much. I've tried mine to ruin your day for the ultimate purpose to get your money. Well, I don't mind doing it today. I'll sleep fine tonight.
First of all, man, that was pretty ignorant, but I wouldn't expect anything less from you because you are totally ghetto.
And debt collectors across the country have been caught on tape doing their own version of Mr. Mean. Tapes provided to 2020 by consumers and their lawyers.
Second of all, man, learn English, get an education, then just sitting on your fat, dairy hair all day long. You're just a loser. You're a loser. That's why you're in collection. Because you owe money you can't pay. Why don't you just go jump in front of a train? Why don't you do that? Get over with it.
Some people you can put blood and sweet to. Other people, you bring your fist down their throat and you pull the money out from their belt. But you give them money.
Hey, Greg, you got my breakfast ready? We're about biscuits and orange marmalade and sausage. We're about $40,000 a kilo.
In this call, the debt collector is not only rude, but in violation of federal law. He threatened to tell others about the consumer's debt.
I guess I'm gonna have to call this other phone number I got. Get your ex-girlfriend to get in contact with me. Look if we can get her riled up enough to get you riled up to get you on the telephone. You make the decision. You wanna be a man, or you wanna hide behind the telephone like a little bitty mouse?
If you think for 1 minute I'm going to defend that, you're terribly wrong. It violates the law in so many ways.
Roseanne Anderson is the general counsel of the Debt Collectors Trade Organization. She says the vast majority of the country's debt collectors follow the law and provide an important public service to the economy, collecting billions of dollars a year owed to American business.
There's nothing wrong with being a debt collector. In fact, I applaud that choice as a profession.
Over the years, this is an industry that's had a very big black eye for alleged abuses and public practices. What do you say?
I say that stereotype is old and outdated.
Yet the most recent report by the Federal Trade Commission, which regulates the industry, found the number of consumer complaints had jumped 14% to a record level. Among the most frequent complaints, the illegal practice of calling consumers' workplaces to reveal the debt to others. There are also thousands of complaints about debt collectors threatening dire consequences, falsely implying consumers have committed a crime. Another violation of federal law. Ferrero down here in Phoenix, and he promised to meet us in this parking lot to tell us his side of the story, but he never showed up. On the phone, he said, the abusive phone call was the result of pressure that he was under from Apex to meet his weekly quota of collections.
Persistence breeds resistance. These collectors want to get paid. They're paid on a commission, they're paid on a percentage.
Minnesota lawyer Pete Berry has made a career out of going after debt collectors, now represents Boiler victims.
She's become a victim and has been re-victimized by a creditor that really has just gone wild. You've got to be tough sometimes, don't you, to get that money paid. People should pay their debts, and debt collectors have a right to be persistent. At the same time, there's no justification for abusing the consumer to get a debt payment.
You're the one who's refusing to pay your bill.
In a statement in 2020, Apex Financial said the collector, Guerrero, was fired for other reasons, and that the phone call made by Guerrero should not cast a shadow upon the hard work and ethical conduct of other Apex debt collectors, all of whom it said, including Guerrero,
He wasn't fired for that. I heard imagine what he was fired for.
It's to help find a solution.
But for the consumer, they're not really that bad.
They're not there, really.
You know?
No, absolutely not. The debt collector is not the enemy of the consumer.
As Mike Flanagan said, as a debt collector, he viewed himself as the consumer's worst enemy, until one day when he tried to contact the debtor and got her sister on the phone instead.
And the woman says to me, well, why are you calling? I says, no, you didn't. Where is Kim right now? I will talk to her right now. And the woman got eerily silent for about 3-4 seconds. And the woman then told me, Kim's dead. She was in the World Trade Center. That's September 11th. And, man, that hit me like a ton of bricks.
Kim was 31-year-old Kimberly Bob, whose sister confirmed in 2020 the debt collector's call.
From that moment on, my faith was gone.
He lost the drive.
I lost my belief that being a bill collector and training these people to do the things that he was doing was absolutely righteous. I lost the ability to not care about the debt.
Flanagan says the best thing consumers can do to stop people like him is contact the Federal Trade Commission, get a lawyer, and get the proof on tape.
I'm the only guy who's gonna end your life. It's not about your door, jackass. I appreciate you.
So, you get the idea. You guys can check out my website. It's got a lot of blogs about debt-related issues, everything from debt buyer cases to TCPA violations, cell phone calls at $500 a call. There's some good information out there. You just have to arm yourself with knowledge. Thanks for